Okay, so now we want to report on the progress and the work ahead on the other plank of the Oregon Business Plan, a set of initiatives to improve the delivery of our public services. Oregon has made enormous progress on our top initiatives over the past year, creating momentum for the year ahead. We're going to hear three presentations this morning. We're going to hear about long-term outcome-based budgeting, about education, and about health care. So let's get started. I would like to introduce now to you Jim Piro, President and Chief Executive Officer of Portland General Electric. Around our office, we call them Brand X. Jim will report on our progress to create a long-term outcomes-based budget to guide the provision of public services. He chairs the committee advising Governor Kitzhaber and Michael Jordan, Oregon's Chief Operating Officer, as they craft a new budget system for Oregon. So please welcome my friend and my colleague, Jim Piro. Jim?
Thank you. Thank you, Brand Y. During 2011, Governor Kitzhaber, along with the legislature, initiated the development of an outcome-based budget process that will be framed in a 10-year planning horizon versus the historic 2-year plan. Michael Jordan, the Chief Operating Officer of the state, and I are leading the executive committee comprised of business leaders and government leaders to guide this effort. And I also want to thank George McNaughton and Sarah Miller from the state for their excellent work with the committee. To help us understand the amount of resources available, the committee is working on a 10-year forecast to understand both revenues and expenses, including significant unfunded liabilities like PERS, financial reserve policy, and key risk factors that will affect both revenues and expenses. Our goal is to put in place a process that gets the best overall outcomes in both the short term and the long term for the money spent. You will hear more about this tomorrow when Michael Jordan does a presentation tomorrow morning on this topic, and I would urge you to attend. To set the stage for this discussion, I have a few slides that will illustrate the challenges facing Oregonians. The following slides were developed by John Tapania of Eco Northwest and are consistent with data produced by the state. These slides show the general fund expenditures as a percentage of total fund revenues. Assuming no significant change or improvement in medical outcomes, especially in Medicaid, the percentage of our state budget dollars going to health and human services will rise from 30% of the general fund to over 50% of the general fund by 2040. If this indeed happens, and again assuming no increases in tax rates, then education funding would drop from the current 50% level of the general fund to 30% of the general fund. To give you an example of what that means in today's dollars, today's current budget is about $7.45 million for education. A 20% reduction would equate to about a $3 billion reduction in spending on education. This is a direction that will impact the competitiveness of Oregonians and will have a direct implication on public safety. This slide illustrates another long-term trend the state is forecasting to face. The bottom line is with more baby boomers retiring and living longer, which I think is a good thing, the number of workers in Oregon divided by the number of Oregonians over 64 will decline from a ratio of about 4 to 2.5. This has a number of very important implications for the state. The biggest is less revenues from the non-working elderly and higher service costs that will be borne by the state to serve that elderly population. We also asked Eco Northwest to assume that the economy grew faster, that we saw more increases in jobs, and therefore more growth in personal income. Total personal income growth grew from 4.7% to 5.2% over the long term. This improves the situation, but there's not sufficient dollars still available for education. So this defines at a very high level the challenges our state is facing in the foreseeable future, and really makes the case for change that has driven the governor to initiate the state's effort to get better outcomes in all areas of state and local government through a new budget process. These are the old questions the state would ask to try to balance a 2-year budget, with little or no regard to the impacts on outcomes in the next 10 years. The current way is all about allocating limited dollars without regard to outcomes or measurable results. We missed a slide here. Can you go back a slide? Yeah. These are the new questions we need to be asking. They focus on achieving better short and long-term outcomes through both strategic spending and strategic investment. Part of an outcome-based budget is to have clear performance metrics to measure outcomes and ensure we are on the right path to get better overall results for Oregonians. This is our goal for all areas of government, to get the best long-term value with the revenues we have available. Better outcomes plus better economy can yield this result. Hopefully this has provided you a brief glimpse and understanding of the challenges ahead, and that it will pique your interest in learning more about outcome-based budgeting. We will talk about that more in the next couple panels. I want to thank and applaud the governor for this bold step to change how we do budgeting in the state. Much has to happen before he presents his 2013-2015 budget to the legislature, and I'm hopeful the legislature will work with him to implement this new approach. I can assure you that the business community is there to support him, and it's a very important initiative that we're supporting. Now I'd like to turn it back over to Pat, who will introduce the 2 panels to cover both education and health and human services. Thank you.
Well done. Thank you, Jim. That is obviously a very, very substantial undertaking, so really we all really appreciate your personal efforts to lead us on that.